Israel accelerates its violence on the West Bank. It's a story of annexation that rarely gets the attention of the international media, and when it does, the coverage falls woefully short. We start with a news story that's getting nowhere near the amount of coverage it should. The extraordinary surge in Israeli settler violence in the West Bank, the de facto annexation that is taking place there. The scale of it, the beatings, the killings, the arsonists setting Palestinian homes on fire is unprecedented. Most of the video that we're seeing has been shot by Palestinians documenting what they can, filling a gap that should never have been theirs to fill, but for the Western mainstream media outlets that have largely stayed or shied away from this story. The relatively few reporters who have gone to the West Bank are getting a taste of what Palestinians live with every day: the intimidation, the beatings, and when the big outlets do drop in, the way this story is told tends to detach the crimes the settlers are committing from the occupying state, Israel. Israeli settlers don't wear uniforms, but they are enabled by soldiers who do. And they are benefiting from international news outlets that far too often keep looking the other way. Even in a place like the West Bank, where the Israeli settler attacks on Palestinians can appear to be random, creating a chaotic effect that can be tough for journalists to track, the data doesn't lie. The evidence is there. According to the UN, the escalation in violence is unprecedented. The beatings, the killings, the arson attacks, the thefts of land. More than 260 such attacks in October alone, the highest number ever recorded. It is a pattern that has continued through November, documented in the videos that keep flooding social media, shot by Palestinians doing a job that international news outlets have largely failed to do.
What we're witnessing in the West Bank right now is actually unprecedented. The highest monthly tally of settler attacks since the UN's Office for Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs started counting. A lot of these attacks targeted the olive harvest, when a lot of Palestinians were out in their fields harvesting this year's produce. But what we've seen in the last few weeks cannot be explained solely by the fact that it's harvest season. The numbers are so much higher than we've seen in the past.
The fact that we are seeing more documentation come out from the phones of civilians really shows you the vacuum of media coverage in the region. And when civilians are documenting, they are risking their lives, risking being shot at either by the settlers or the army. But this is their last offering for the world to know what's happening here. It just shows the media coverage vacuum that is here.
It's lost on nobody that they're facing a genocide there, and the world is just not paying attention. They don't know what's happening. And for the most part, people don't fight back against the violence. People know that if they are to injure a settler, they might be killed. The settlers will come back to the village the next day and, collectively punish the whole village, burn homes to the ground, kill people who had nothing to do with it. And so all they can really do is document it and show the world.
Beyond attacking Palestinians, Israeli settlers are going after journalists.
They're being attacked!
A few weeks ago, on November 8th, masked settlers armed with sticks and hammers attacked a group of Palestinian reporters covering the olive harvest in Beita, injuring at least 5 of them. Intimidation and violence are among the many tools the Israelis use to stifle journalism, along with the checkpoints, roadblocks that control traffic across the West Bank, and the arbitrary arrest of Palestinians, thousands of whom are jailed despite never being charged with a crime. Various tools that engineer a silencing of voices that Israelis see as Palestinians first and journalists second, the blacking out of a story they do not want the world to see.
The settlers have shown that nobody's off limits. They clubbed and beat a Reuters journalist who was clearly wearing a press uniform because they wanted journalists to know that you're not safe here. When I was running from this mob of masked settlers, I was shouting, "Press! American press!" It certainly didn't stop them. And so it's a pretty clear scare tactic. They want journalists to be afraid to cover it. They want them to know that they're not safe.
So for example, when I get stopped at these checkpoints, I generally do not say I'm a journalist.
and just kind of try to move through as quick as possible. Because as soon as you say you're a journalist, they're like, okay, who do you report for? What do you write? What are you doing here? And generally, if you say you're going to one of these locations, they're not going to want you to go and report on this until they stop you and hold you up and maybe search you.
The Israeli government clearly wants to limit reporting on settler violence and more generally on Israeli policies in the West Bank. We saw that with the banning of Al Jazeera in the West Bank. The army regularly disrupts the work of Palestinian journalists and international journalists. It prevents them from reaching certain areas. Sometimes it attacks them. This hasn't stopped journalists from reporting, but there need to be more journalists reporting on the West Bank, both local and international.
And unlike Gaza, Israel has not locked journalists out of the West Bank. So the international news organizations that do not send reporters in must not find the pogroms taking place there newsworthy. And when they do focus on the story from a distance, the framing often separates what the settlers are doing from the policies of the Israeli state.
We did hear from Israeli President Isaac Herzog, who condemned this arson attack that we saw yesterday. He blamed a handful of very dangerous individuals.
In between the attacks, life here appears to go on as normal, but the presence of the settlers just up on the hill is changing the way people operate.
That disconnect, the notion that these are rogue settlers out for themselves, as opposed to doing their government's bidding, does not reflect reality. The UN and Amnesty International, among others, have been explicit on this point, that the attacks are state-backed, as evidenced by the Israeli soldiers who are often there protecting the settlers.
Almost every time we see settlers attack, we see videos showing Israeli soldiers who are in the area doing nothing to stop it and not arresting the settlers who have just carried out an attack. The army is not in the West Bank to maintain the peace. It's there to protect the settlers. This is apartheid in action. If Israel wanted to stamp out settler violence, it could do it tomorrow. And the fact that it doesn't do that should reveal that it serves the state's agenda.
A lot of the time, these settlers are armed by Israel themselves. And Israeli settler politicians like Ben-Gvir, who we saw a surge in the beginning of Israel's assault on Gaza in 2023, with weapons and weapons permits being handed out to these Israeli settlers. And not only are they armed, the Palestinians have no way to protect themselves. And on top of that, they're a lot of the time protected by the Israeli military, who is also armed.
Settlers have been armed with drones, with quad bikes, with M16s by the Israeli army. This is happening with settlers having joint communications with the Israeli army. When they even invade towns and villages, they know exactly the routes to take. They know how many Palestinians are there. This is not random. It is not impulsive. It is coordinated and it is premeditated and planned. What we are seeing is a military and settler symbiosis.
Journalists, be they Palestinian, Israeli, or international, need not conduct deep investigations to expose the fact that the settler violence is state-backed. All they have to do is go online. Check out the Instagram or Telegram accounts of two of the Netanyahu government's most far-right ministers, Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich.
ככה תופסים כאן, תקשיבו טוב עכשיו ברצינות. אנחנו בעלי הבית על המדינה הזאת ונילחם כדי שתהיה כאן משילות וריבונות בכל מקום במדינת ישראל.
People are hearing what Ben-Gvir and Smotrich and, these other ministers are saying every day, defending these violent settler attacks, flaunting that they can do whatever they want, that nobody is reining them in. Something that people might not recognize because of the just severe lack of coverage of the West Bank, where it's becoming undeniable that the settler violence is part of a state project.
With international media, there isn't a linking that this is the military with the Israeli settlers. To again frame them as they're acting alone is really costing Palestinians their lands, their resources, and their lives. This is malpractice. This is inability to do a basic Google research and cover it to your audiences properly. This is inability to do your job. And now Palestinians are facing the most unprecedented and intensified attacks they have ever faced in the West Bank.